This is Today's It Happened. Good Friday evening to you. I'm Stephanie Liebergen, guiding you through our timeline of the day's most important news, from the potential for much-needed relief at the gas pump to continued severe weather systems across the United States. But first, we started the morning with a look at President Trump, who today stated the Strait of Hormuz is, quote, completely open for business. Maurice Giorgio has the details. The Strait of Hormuz is back open. Oil prices are dropping. Stocks are surging amid the news. Let's get right over to our Maurice Giorgio joining us from Missoula, Montana, to dig into what was yet another busy week in politics. So let's start with that breaking news. Strait of Hormuz reopening. Few questions there. Iran says it's fully reopened. President Trump says the U.S. will keep blocking Iranian ports. President Trump has put out a number of Truth Social posts today about this Strait of Hormuz. So it sounds like we're making progress here, but there's definitely still work to be done, it seems. Yes?
Yeah, great to see you, Steph. Great to be with you. I think this is just one of these tennis matches, and we're just kind of watching the ball bounce back and forth. Like, Iran is saying that, yes, the Strait of Hormuz is open, but they're saying it's only through the remainder of the ceasefire, which is set to end on Tuesday. President Trump says that Iran is committed to never close the Strait of Hormuz again. So again, mixed messaging here that we're going to have to see play out in real time. Good news, though. I mean, it's good to have the Strait of Hormuz open. We were already seeing oil prices dropping and stocks surging here in the U.S., but as we know, things can change in a moment's notice. We are seeing that there are supposed to possibly be some talks this weekend, so we'll see kind of what transpires and what happens again as we hit Tuesday when this ceasefire ends, if nothing is accomplished before then.
Yeah, certainly it's continuing the theme of us hearing one thing from the U.S. Trump administration, but Iran telling a different story through their media outlets. But another big deal this week, of course, the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. If that holds, how might that agreement get us closer to a longer-term peace deal between the U.S. and Iran?
Well, you just have to look at this in this broader picture of this broader region, right? These are all key players here, and they're all moving and reacting based on the different conflicts they're in. So again, this seems to be holding, this 10-day truce between Israel and Lebanon, it seems to be holding. An important point here, though. This agreement is between the two countries. It is not with Hezbollah, which is the militant group that's backed by Iran. It's considered more powerful than Lebanon's military itself. So that's kind of the wild card. Hezbollah is the wild card because they're not bound to this agreement. So that's something I think a lot of people are just wary of as we watch this continue, with the hopes that we don't see more violence.
Certainly don't want to see any more violence, but of course, you know, we've seen in ceasefires sometimes attacks have continued, even though the ceasefire is maybe tentatively holding. So a lot of kind of wait and see in that region, both with the Strait of Hormuz and with the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire and our U.S.-Iran ceasefire that is coming up to an expiration date just a few days away. Some headlines we're watching this morning: another round of dangerous severe storms heading for the central U.S. today, and it's threatening more destruction in areas that are already dealing with historic flooding. The Great Lakes region had a brief pause Thursday after more than 36 tornado reports and over 300 hail reports this week. Heavy rain led to water rescues and caused rivers to surge past record flood levels in Michigan and Wisconsin. Multiple dams are at capacity, and residents in several locations have been told to prepare for possible evacuations. Milwaukee has already crossed the mark for its wettest April on record, and we are only at the 17th of the month. Federal officials announced U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Acting Director Todd Lyons will resign. Lyons was a key player in President Trump's mass deportation agenda. There's no word on the reason for his resignation, but it goes into effect in May. Lyons has been with the agency for 20 years. The man accused of killing Charlie Cook is pushing to get cameras banned from the courtroom. Tyler Robinson is due in court today. His lawyers are expected to argue that biased news coverage is tainting potential jurors in his aggravated murder case. The 23-year-old is accused of shooting and killing Kirk from a rooftop during a Turning Point USA event at Utah Valley University in September. If convicted, prosecutors intend to seek the death penalty. QVC says it has voluntarily entered Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It's the parent company for the home shopping TV network that shares its name. The company says it's trying to slash billions of dollars of debt, but it also says it does not plan to lay off staff and it intends to pay its vendors. The QVC network is struggling from low ratings, online competition, and tariffs. This is Today As It Happened. Stay with us. Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's return to our briefing of today's top stories. Back to the breaking news. We've been tracking this morning the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. The market's reacting really well to that news. Gas prices already starting to drop, at least on the international global trading market. So right now I want to bring in Patrick DeHaan. He is joining us live from Chicago. He's the head of petroleum analysis at Gas Buddy. Thank you, Patrick, for being here as always. So oil and gas prices already falling after news of this reopening is spreading. Do you expect that trend to continue?
Yeah, it certainly will. Likely will accelerate here over the course of the next few days. Over the weekend, the national average down to $4.05 a gallon. That's already about a 7.5 cent a gallon drop from last week. The drop that we're currently experiencing was due to the ceasefire announced last Wednesday, which plummeted oil 15%. And now an additional drop of 10% today as word comes that the president in Iran are going to reopen the strait. We'll be watching very carefully for the resumption of flow of oil through the strait. For now, though, oil's decline is likely to start being passed down to the retail level here over the course of the weekend. We likely will see the national average falling back below $4 a gallon here, potentially as early as Sunday. And where we are headed now, well, the national average could fall as low as $3.85 a gallon here in the next couple of weeks, so long as the situation continues to show positive signs of improvement and we don't see any re-escalation. So, I want to be very optimistic, but this situation has been full of twists and turns, and there's still the possibility of a re-aggravation of tensions here in the Middle East.
Certainly, that $3.85 sounds a lot better than the $4.15 I just paid to refill the gas tank in my car just yesterday. Public messages from President Trump and Iran show that the two sides might not be on the same page, something that has happened frequently throughout this conflict. What do we need to see to have confidence that the global energy market is getting back to normal?
Yeah, well, we really need to see ships starting to go through the strait, and we need to continue to see joint statements from the president and from Iran that are at least closely aligned. Right now, the president continuing to put a blockade on Iran's ports, which may pressure it into making an agreement. If that doesn't happen, if there's no long-term agreement, any escalations or re-escalations certainly could reverse the decline in oil prices that we're seeing. So over the weekend, I'll still be watching shipping travel to see if there's ships getting through the strait. That is really the key here. And keep in mind, even once these very large crude carriers, once these products start flowing through the strait, we're still talking about many weeks of recovery to get refineries back online, to start producing things like jet fuel, diesel, and gasoline. This is not going to be solved overnight, but certainly some promising developments here to start the weekend.
Well, another thing we've got our eyes on is, of course, the ceasefire that is currently due to expire next week. If we see fighting resume, what do you think that would do to gas prices?
Well, we could see oil prices going right back up then, depending on the degree of any future escalation. So as you mentioned, we're not out of the woods, though the risk is decreasing here as we've seen a little bit of a joint statement that both countries saying that the strait is open. But absolutely, if there is re-escalation, oil prices still could go right back up. So still very much a wide range of potential outcomes for gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel prices this summer. There are certainly no guarantees that what we're seeing here right now will last. Hopefully it will.
Well, to use the phrase that, things can rise like a rocket and drop like a feather, I think a lot of people are wondering, well, how long is it going to take to get prices back to what they were before the war started? We're talking under $3 a gallon. How long are we potentially waiting for that?
Yeah, the president's very optimistic on that. I'm certainly not quite as optimistic as the president. Right now, we're seeing seasonal trends that are also pushing prices up. So even if we get the war off of an impact from gasoline prices, we still have rising demand. The change to more expensive summer gasoline, though a waiver has been issued allowing for a less stringent type of gasoline this summer. We also have refineries that are continuing maintenance for the next few weeks. So it's those seasonal factors that will likely prevent those sub-$3 prices from possibly poking smoking out until later this year. Now, to be very specific, you could see sub $3 prices popping up this summer in some low price communities, but I do not expect the national average is going to go back to the sub $3 level until potentially later this year, and still a lot of details to be worked out before that becomes an increasing possibility.
Certainly, you mentioned summer gas. We're heading into the summer travel season. I think the price of gas is something a lot of families are going to continue to be following. Patrick DeHaan, head of petroleum analysis at Gas Buddy. As always, thank you for your time and insight this morning.
Appreciate you having me.
I'm Stephanie Liebergan in Washington, and we continue to start with an update to that breaking news we've been talking about. President Trump saying the Strait of Hormuz is back open, but Iran seeming to dispute that. They say in order for civilian ships to pass through, they have to pay a toll and coordinate their route with the Iranian government. They also slammed what they call baseless claims from President Trump. Now, President Trump posted this statement along with others on Truth Social, where he says the Strait of Hormuz is completely open. He also claimed that Iran will turn over its enriched uranium to the United States and that Iran agreed to never close the strait again. He later posted, though, that the U.S. blockade of Iran and its ports will remain in full force until Iran reaches a deal to end the war. This development comes amid a 2-week ceasefire. That ceasefire expected to expire on Tuesday, that is, unless Iran and the U.S. agree to an extension. This certainly is a developing story that we're going to continue to keep our eyes on for you throughout the afternoon. In other headlines today, a U.S. Army soldier who was killed in the Korean War is finally home after being identified through DNA testing. 19-year-old Sergeant Celestino Chavez Jr. had been considered missing in action since 1953. After he was positively identified later this year, he was buried in his hometown of Gallup, New Mexico this week. Chavez's remains were discovered among 55 boxes of remains handed over to the U.S. by North Korea following a summit with President Donald Trump in 2018. Coming up on Today's It Happened, how are Americans reacting to the ongoing feud between President Donald Trump and Pope Leo? Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty has analysis straight ahead. Welcome back to Today's It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergan. Let's continue our walkthrough of the day's top headlines. President Trump found himself at the center of controversy again this week, but he was dominating headlines after attacking the first American pope, calling him weak on crime and terrible on foreign policy. Roughly 54 million adults in the U.S. identify as Catholic. Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty is joining us live to dig in more to exactly how Americans are feeling about this really unprecedented feud between the president and the pope.
Yeah, and Steph, it feels like this is the storyline that just will never end, of course, going on for the better part of a week. And it's not just that back and forth between the Pope and the president. It's also that AI-generated image of, I think most people would say, Donald Trump depicted as Jesus. He, of course, later said he thought he was a doctor in that image that you're seeing on your screen right now. But look, there are probably a lot of Republican politicians who have Catholic constituencies that are banging their head over this back and forth. And it goes to probably a broader point. You mentioned the millions of Americans who identify as Catholic, but around election time, Catholics don't necessarily get the same type of attention that other religious voting blocs do, like evangelicals. And the reason for that is their vote is pretty split. You've had some prominent politicians as Republicans, Democrats, both sides of the aisle who have identified as Catholic. But Donald Trump in 2024 made some pretty good headway. In fact, according to Pew's validated voters, he actually won that group by 8 points in 2024. And that was an improvement over how he did against Joe Biden, of course, the nation's only second Catholic president. And even Joe Biden, being a Catholic, split that vote with Donald Trump. But according to a Fox News poll taken in March, and remember, that is before most of what we are talking about here over those war of words over the war in Iran, his approval rating had gone down about 4 points. He was in underwater. So the president no doubt losing ground with Catholics, as he is losing ground with a number of key voting blocs. But it was interesting talking about how long it feels like this has played out. Yesterday, when he was leaving the White House, maybe giving a hint that he was ready to bring this to a close. Let's take a listen.
Pope has to understand that, very simple. I have nothing against the Pope. His brother's MAGA all the way. I like his brother, Louis. I'm not fighting with him. The Pope made a statement. He says Iran can have a nuclear weapon. I say Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And if the Pope looked at the 42,000 people that were killed over the last 2 or 3 months as a protester with no weapons, no nothing, I mean, you take a look at that. So I can disagree with the Pope. I have a right to disagree.
I'm not fighting with him. So perhaps an out is coming. Maybe we are seeing the end of this ongoing war of words. So the Pope himself has been direct in his comments, but not directly mentioning President Donald Trump, saying, blessed be the peacemakers. The other part of this that's really interesting to watch, Steph, is Vice President J.D. Vance, who is Catholic. He earlier this week said the Pope should not be, or should be careful when talking about theology. Other Republicans like John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, saying, well, isn't that kind of his job? So more to come here. Maybe this is the end of it, but no doubt there are some Republicans who have conservative Catholic constituencies that would prefer this be over.
Of course, and as you mentioned, both Democrats and Republicans, well-known Catholics. Of course, you can quickly go back to former President Biden, who was notably Catholic and frequently attended Mass on the weekend. So, and a story that we will certainly need to keep our eyes on. Scripps News Political Director Andrew Rafferty. Thank you very much.
So there seems to be some confusion about the status of the Strait. What is the administration saying about what's going on with the Strait at this hour?
Patrick, President Trump is touting a breakthrough with Iran as it announces that the Strait of Hormuz is open. But as you alluded to, there are a number of questions that remain. The president says the Strait is, quote, completely open and ready for business, and that Iran has agreed to not close the Strait ever again, but that the U.S. naval blockade will remain until a, quote, transaction with Iran is 100% complete, he wrote on Truth Social. Now, while the president denies that this is part of the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon announced yesterday, part of a series of Truth Social messages he posted online earlier today. Iran's foreign minister in his announcement indicated that the opening is in line with that ceasefire and that the passage of vessels is on a coordinated route already announced by Iran. Iranian military spokesperson outlining specific conditions, including passage for commercial vessels through an Iranian designated route, coordinated with the IRGC, and suggested that that would close with the continued U.S. blockade. Meanwhile, the president still suggested that a deal with Iran could be reached soon, reiterating that most points were already negotiated. Now, the announcement comes as Pakistani mediators have been meeting in Tehran with the Iranians this week amidst those discussions for another round of in-person discussions between Iran and the United States that the president has hinted could happen as soon as this weekend. Meanwhile, as the administration has maintained that market disruptions, as we have seen the conflict between the U.S. and Iran carry out, were short-term, we did see oil prices drop this morning in line with the announcement. The Commerce Secretary addressing the economic impact earlier today, saying this.
You just had, in the last week, the fastest turnaround in equity markets in 36 years. The Straits of Hormuz were just announced an hour ago that they're open, and ships are moving. So the price of oil dropped 10% this morning. So the opportunity, the concept of changing the global threat level is fundamental. And I think what's happened is we have Stockholm syndrome. We're used to terrorism being part of our society. And the concept of breaking terrorism is a unique concept that hasn't really been driven into the risk premium of the world.
And meanwhile, Patrick, we are seeing both in Truth Social posts and various commentary to media, the president maintain a positive outlook on the prospects of reaching a wider deal with Iran.
So obviously, Strait of Hormuz is one of the big issues there. Another one has always been Iran's desire to perhaps have a nuclear weapon. Can you talk to us a little bit about how Iran's enriched uranium has been factoring into all of this and perhaps prospects of a wider deal?
It's a key issue between the United States and Iran, one that we saw in the negotiations ahead of the conflict starting, and one that has appeared to remain a key issue today. The president in Truth Social post today and in commentary yesterday suggesting that Iran has agreed that the U.S. will get Iran's enriched uranium. Now, in public comments, including earlier this week, Iran continued to underscore its enrichment program, but the president telling Reuters in an interview earlier today that the U.S. would work with Iran to excavate it. Now, in various Iranian-linked media outlets, reports are pushing back against Iranian commitment to deliver enriched uranium. What we know per a U.S. official is that the red lines for the United States in negotiation have been ending all uranium enrichment, dismantling its enrichment facilities, and retrieving that highly enriched uranium in particular, among a number of other points, Patrick. So how this plays out as we are seeing differing messaging here remains to be seen, but it has been central to the U.S. demands.
You're watching Today's It Happened. We'll be back shortly. Thanks again for joining us on Today's It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergen with your daily look at the day's biggest stories.
The partial government shutdown is now more than 2 months long. The divide not just between Republicans and Democrats, but also between the House and the Senate on how to fully fund the Department of Homeland Security. Scripps News senior congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed reports on the tug of war.
After more than 60 days, the Department of Homeland Security is still not funded. Even though President Trump directed his administration to pay employees despite the shutdown weeks ago, legal experts say the move could be challenged as Congress has still not voted to fund the department. On Capitol Hill, Democrats have agreed to fund nearly all of the department,
Pockets empty, no belt on.
including TSA, FEMA, and the Coast Guard. But Democratic leaders say they will not support funding for immigration enforcement and ICE without concrete reforms. In response, Republicans are now saying they'll go at it alone, attempting to fund immigration enforcement and ICE, possibly all the way through the end of President Trump's term, with no Democrat support through a complicated process, much like the one used to pass President Trump's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act last year.
Look, there's not a Republican in this building, including the entire Capitol, that's going to vote against funding Border Patrol and ICE.
Republicans say they support funding even without reforms to ICE. But some have expressed unease with passing a narrow bill that funds ICE but lacks any other Republican priorities ahead of the midterm elections.
I'd still like to see the Save America Act. We've just stopped talking about it all of a sudden.
The criteria I would use would be, number one, would they help the American people with cost of living?
While Republicans can pass the bill without Democrat support, their narrow majority in the House of Representatives and the Senate will make it difficult. Also challenging the tight timeline. Republican congressional leaders want to get this bill moving through Congress by this coming week. Nathaniel Reed, Scripps News Group, Washington.
A near miss between an American Airlines plane and a truck. Look at this video from Charlotte, North Carolina on Wednesday. The pilot of the plane had to slam on the brakes, according to air traffic control radio. The pilot telling the tower that was really bad. Thankfully, no one was hurt, and the plane was able to take off after a brief pause. A similar incident happened at New York's LaGuardia Airport last month. Both pilots of an Air Canada flight died and dozens of passengers injured when the plane crashed into a fire truck that crossed the active runway. The House unanimously agrees to extend the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, known as FISA, through April 30th. After a chaotic night on the House floor, the surveillance authority was set to expire April 20th, and the short-term patch now heads to the Senate. GOP leaders thought they had a deal with conservative holdouts, but privacy-focused Republicans blocked both a 5-year renewal and an 18-month clean extension. House Speaker Mike Johnson says the 10-day extension buys time to resolve disputes over balancing national securities and civil liberties. Another round of dangerous, severe storms is heading for the central U.S. Today, it's threatening more destruction in areas already dealing with historic flooding. The Great Lakes region had a brief pause Thursday after more than 36 tornado reports and over 300 hail sightings this week. Heavy rain has led to water rescues and caused rivers to surge past record flood levels in both Michigan and Wisconsin. Multiple dams are at capacity, and residents in several locations have been told to prepare for possible evacuation. So what to expect next? Scripps News Group's meteorologist Brian Niznansky is here with the forecast. Brian, we saw those really frightening images of tornadoes in Rochester, Minneapolis not too long ago. What are we going to see ahead?
This is just starting to really fire up. We are in for a major severe weather outbreak as this late afternoon and evening unfolds. This is a look at the current radar across the state of Wisconsin back towards Iowa. We have several tornado warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings. Again, you can see at least 3 here in Wisconsin, another one in northern Illinois, and a few back towards Iowa as well. Again, we are just getting going with this severe weather outbreak here in the state of Wisconsin, and this is going to extend also down to the south of us. So as we take a look here down to the south, you can see that we have multiple severe thunderstorm warnings that extend all the way down through Wichita. Tornado warning that's to the north of Kansas City as well. Again, this is big time stuff here unfolding as we look at futurecasts. Now, this is again a computer model that's going to watch the progression of these storms travel across the state of Wisconsin, eventually into northern Illinois. Missouri also looking rough through the night tonight. Eventually, this makes its way into St. Louis, maybe by around 11 o'clock tonight. Chicago, 11 o'clock tonight. Again, seeing some rough weather. And then eventually, as the overnight hours unfold, these storms should start to lose some of their strength after midnight tonight with the diurnal heating going down. Now, as we head into Saturday morning, still some rain to go, but the severe weather should be wrapping up by then. And finally, we'll start to dry out a little bit in the Great Lakes. But the overall severe risk today, I mean, look at how large this area of level 3 of 5 goes from Wisconsin down into Oklahoma. And then there's a spot here with a level 4 of 5 severe risk, including tornadoes setting up across Kansas and into Missouri. Now, again, I think the greatest tornado threat with this actually going to unfold across southwestern Wisconsin and into northern Illinois. Here's another look at these risk maps through the Storm Prediction Center. The area in the yellow is the highest risk for tornadoes. And then you see these little hash marks. That is a sign of intense tornadoes, not just your baby EF0s, EF1s, but like EF2 or greater tornado threat as we head into this evening. So again, going to be watching that very closely. And this lines up historically when we see the most tornadoes during the late afternoon hours and into the early evening. Again, many communities across the Midwest will be on alert. Now, to go along with the threat for severe weather, we've also had an extremely wet period. Here in Milwaukee, we have had our wettest April on record, ever on record here in Milwaukee, and that's the case across much of the state of Wisconsin. Each one of these little green polygons here indicating a river that currently has a river flood warning. So yeah, it's been a rough week. It has been a rough month so far here in Wisconsin and across the entire Midwest.
Yeah, meanwhile, here in D.C., we're in a drought, Brian. We need some of that moisture, so good day to be weather
for sure.
Well, good day to be weather aware for sure. We appreciate it. Meteorologist Brian Niznansky.
We'll be back in just a moment as we continue tracking today's top news. Today As It Happened, a Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of our biggest stories. Let's pick up right where we left off.
Having a big day. We'll see how it all turns out, but it should be good. We've had some very good discussions, and hopefully that subject that you like to talk about would be very good. And we've done a good job, but we'll see. Talks are going on. It'll go on over the weekend, and a lot of good things are happening. And that includes Lebanon, too.
There's been reporting today that there's still, Iran says there's significant differences.
Well, there could be. Let's see what happens. If there are, we'll have to straighten it out, but I don't think there's too many significant differences.
On the blockade, Mr. President, what will it take to end the blockade?
When the agreement is signed, the blockade ends. As soon as the agreement gets signed, that's when the blockade ends.
Did Anthropic have a meeting at the White House?
Who?
Sir, Anthropic?
I have no idea.
On Cuba, Mr. President, is Cuba next?
Imagine owing the government nearly $100,000. That is exactly what a Virginia woman was told she owed in disability payments. But after a years-long battle, a judge ruled the government was wrong. And here's a twist. The judge actually found the agency owes her money. As Tyler Lane from our Scripps News Group explains, her fight is not over.
Amanda Brown was stunned after she says she received a letter from the Social Security Administration seeking almost $100,000 from her. Stored away in the attic of Amanda Brown's Henrico home.
And again, this is all letters from Social Security, my health records, doctor records.
Are boxes of documents that span more than a decade.
I don't know how to explain that.
All part of a long-standing battle with the Social Security Administration.
Really, really stressful. It scares me. Like, I definitely have sleepless nights over it.
It dates back to 2015 when Brown says a pseudocyst on her pancreas triggered a series of intense medical issues that left her persistently sick and in pain.
Imagine your worst day of like a stomach problem. Mine's like that every day. And then it's like flare-ups in between that. So it's just constant.
So Brown left her job and applied for disability benefits through the SSA, which is supposed to be a lifeline for Americans who suffer from conditions that render them unable to work. But she joins the many others who have told CBS 6 they faced mounting bureaucratic hurdles getting the assistance they needed. After multiple initial denials from the SSA, Brown was eventually approved for a period of back pay. But according to her case files, Social Security incorrectly processed her benefits, causing an overpayment that a judge concluded was not her fault. Brown never realized there was an error until a letter arrived in 2021, right after she had applied for a second period of disability that she says sent her into shock.
So this is the original letter that shows that they're asking me for $95,000.
$95,428 to be exact, which the SSA said was due back in less than 3 weeks.
I was completely distraught.
Brown says she repeatedly called her local office seeking explanations, but received little help. She filed appeals and says the SSA continued to send her confusing letters up until 2024, changing the amount of the alleged overpayment.
They were wrong on the $90,000. They reduced it and said, no, you owe us $60-some-thousand. So I had to start the process over again. I had to ask for appeals. The appeals were denied. I had to ask for waivers. The waivers were denied. Then they sent me a third letter that said, we were wrong again. You owe us $53,000. Again, put an appeal in, it was denied. I put waivers in, it was denied.
In October 2025, Brown finally went before administrative law judge Kelly Day, who found that Brown was not overpaid for the full timeline that SSA claimed. In fact, she had been underpaid. Day directed Brown's local office to calculate just how much money she's owed. Brown estimates it's about $80,000, the withholding of which, she says, has caused a financial toll.
We had to move from our home. Completely disrupted my life of not, I mean, it's a lot of money, but it's a lot of money over those years that I would have used to pay a house payment.
The judge's order, dated December 19th, 2025, said Brown should get her payment within 40 to 60 days. Now, nearly 4 months have passed, and still, she says she's received no word and no money from the SSA. She's begging for a resolution to what she describes as a long, grueling, unfair process.
I'm just defeated. Like, I'm defeated. I feel like nobody's listening. You guys are listening. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you for responding to me, and thank you for being there for me, because I feel like somebody has finally said, we acknowledge you. We acknowledge your problem. We will help you. That's all I wanted from Social Security.
We'll have more of today's news coming up on Today as It Happened.
You're watching Scripps News.
President Trump nominated Dr. Erica Schwartz to lead the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Schwartz is a former deputy surgeon general who Trump called incredibly talented and a star. The Atlanta-based CDC has faced leadership turmoil since President Trump returned to office last year. The agency is overseen by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has attempted to rewrite childhood vaccine recommendations, though some of those efforts were recently put on hold by a federal judge. Joining me now for more on this nomination is Dr. Celine Gallender, a physician, professor, and editor-at-large for public health at KFF Health News. So first, I want to start with your thoughts on Dr. Schwartz as the possible new CDC director.
Stephanie, Dr. Schwartz is very qualified to be leading the CDC. So we're talking about Brown University, an MD, a law degree, a public health degree, and a military career. She was deputy surgeon general during Trump's first term, and public health leaders I spoke with yesterday reflected on her ability to push back and speak truth to power when she felt like that was necessary. She reported to Admiral Brett Giroir under the first Trump administration during the COVID pandemic, and sometimes they disagreed. For example, she led the effort for drive-through testing, and yet he said to me, and I'm quoting now, that he had the highest respect for Admiral Schwartz. She has impeccable credentials, unquestioned integrity, and that he supported her nomination enthusiastically. And then similarly, people on the other side of the aisle had very positive things to say about her military and public health experience and were quite supportive of the nomination.
Wow, getting Democrats and Republicans to agree on a Trump nominee certainly feels like something that's out of the ordinary. Dr. Susan Menarez was the previous CDC director. She was forced out in August after just a few weeks on the job after her confirmation. 2 other top CDC posts are also vacant right now and have been for months. What is the impact when these top CDC jobs are unfilled?
Well, it's really created tremendous chaos and confusion at the agency. People don't always know whether they've had a job, who they report to, and one of the main activities of the CDC is actually to funnel funding down from the federal government down to state and local public health departments. They do that in the form of grants, where they will every year say, here are the priorities. Let's take diabetes, for example. Here are the best practices, the latest science. Here's what we've shown or what communities have shown that works really well for them that might be generalized to other parts of the country. This is the kind of thing we're going to fund. And those notices for grant awards have not gone out for many programs across the agency, which is creating delays in getting funding down to the grassroots level to get the work done. And then there's just tremendous poor morale. People feel like the administration has turned them into a scapegoat for many of the frustrations coming out of the pandemic, and that they have turned their back on science. And so I think there's a lot of trust rebuilding to do within the agency as well as with the American public.
Well, knowing what happened to Dr. Menarez getting confirmed, getting pushed out, what are you expecting to see as Dr. Schwartz moves through the Senate confirmation process? What hard questions might she be asked when she's testifying before confirmation?
Well, I think vaccines are going to be front and center. The past year and a half, we've seen a real attack on the childhood vaccine schedule, as well as other vaccines like the COVID vaccine, mRNA vaccines. So I think that's going to be top of the list, but also other activities like chronic diseases, which frankly, there's a lot of agreement, again, on both sides of the aisle that eating healthier, exercise are very important. I think the real question is, how do you get there? How do you encourage better habits, lifestyles among Americans? How do you make it easier and more affordable? And that's where there may be differences of opinion.
Yeah, certainly eating healthy is, at least from my experience, is not the cheapest way to get through the grocery store. If Dr. Schwartz is confirmed, what do you see as the biggest issues on her agenda when she takes that post?
Well, rebuilding the agency is going to be a real challenge. And how do you bring back talent and expertise? The agency has lost a lot of people over the past year. And then how do you also restructure for the future? There have been a number of efforts actually over the years by different CDC directors to restructure the agency. And this does create a window of opportunity to make some big changes and reimagine how the CDC functions.
Dr. Celine Gounder, thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning and kind of giving us a little preview of what we might see as Dr. Schwartz moves through the confirmation process. Thank you.
There's some good news for renters. Realtor.com reporting that in today's market, renting could get you closer to owning a home. The average rental price falling to just over $1,600 in March. That's more than 2.5 years of declines. For many renters, that's more money in their pockets on average, $920 a month compared to the cost of buying a startup home. In Austin, renters saving $1,700 each month, but that gap is starting to close. As mortgage rates and home prices continue to ease, it's getting easier now for renters to make the leap. Cheaper to buy, for instance, in both Pittsburgh and Baltimore.
World tensions and high gas prices have some travelers swapping international plans for road trips closer to home this year. And some are even choosing staycations or daycations.
Like the good old days, Kathy Sharp and her family hit the highway for a road trip, even using an old-fashioned paper map.
And he actually follows it. He follows our trips.
But the gas and hotel prices now are anything but nostalgic.
It's just way too expensive. That's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, people can't afford it.
Daniel Porras, meantime, is planning a staycation this summer.
I prefer to stay at home until price goes down.
It's not just gas prices keeping people closer to home. Travel site The Points Guy finds nearly a quarter of Americans have reconsidered travel plans due to recent global events. Recent chaos at security checkpoints didn't help either.
62% of our guests book within 20 miles of where they live.
Giannis Modi is CEO of the booking platform Hotels by Day, a service that lets you book a hotel room for use during the day hours. Dubbed daycations, they cost a fraction of an overnight stay and are part of a growing travel trend.
They escape for the day, they experience the wellness of the hotel for the day, and then they simply come back home.
Whether the pool or the spa is calling your name, amenities are included. For more savings, Modi says check out a company's loyalty program.
We do holiday discounts or special days discounts.
Deborah Foster says if gas goes any higher, she may skip driving to the Carolinas this summer.
Might do a bus trip instead of a road trip.
Yet another solution to high pump prices so you don't waste your money. John Mattery, Scripps News Group.
Thanks for spending part of your evening with Today's It Happened. I'm Stephanie Liebergen. Have a wonderful Friday night.